hiking and running. Some of the contests reminded me of scenes from Vietnam, where team members were carrying other team members across the finish line. Of course, to be a real business school, we bet money. Every participant put money in the pot, and it was winner take all. A winning team of 15 could walk away with as much as $50,000 in prize money. At our business school for investors, instead of talking about investing, we actually would build a stock market trading floor. The different teams would represent different stocks and money managers. As market conditions changed, the teams had to adjust their investment strategies. Again, at the end of the school, the winning team walked away with the money. In 1993, although the business was successful and profitable, I knew it was once again time to move on. In the summer of 1994, Kim and I sold our share of the business to our partner and retired. The passive income generated from our investments was now greater than our expenses. We were finally out of the rat race. We weren't rich, but we were financially free. In my book, Rich Dads Retire Young, Retire Rich, you will see on the back cover a picture of Kim and me sitting on horses on a hill overlooking a crystal blue ocean. That vacation on a private island in Fiji was our reward for retiring early. Kim was 37, and I was 47. Know when to stop. In his book, Good to Great, Jim Collins does a whole piece on knowing when to stop. Reading his book in 2004 took me back to the times when I also stopped in 1984 and 1994. There was no clear signal, no sign from God saying it's time to stop. Each time, there was simply a moment when I knew the process I was in had come to an end. It was time to stop and wait for the beginning of the next process. Many times I meet business people who want to stop but can't stop. They cannot stop for different reasons. One common reason is that their BI triangle is weak. To cover up for the weaknesses, the owner often has to work harder or longer to make up for the weaknesses. Another reason is that the owner cannot afford to stop. Again, this is a symptom of a weakness in the BI triangle. Another common reason is that the owner, although successful, continues to work because he or she does not know what to do next. According to Jim Collins, a person may need to stop first, take some time off, and then look for the next thing. That is what I did. I simply stopped, let the dust settle, and waited a few years to see what would happen next. The more people you serve, the more effective you become. From 1984 to 1994, I was firmly entrenched in the S quadrant. I was not going to make any premature moves toward the B quadrant. As expected, as our success grew, so did our exhaustion. Exhaustion is what often occurs with successful people in the S quadrant. Since an S individual often does the work himself, more success means more work. An S often works for a $1 per hour compensation plan, and as we all know, there are only so many hours in a day. When Kim and I stopped, it was not the hard work or long hours that caused us to stop. What was disturbing me was how few people our work was reaching. After all, only a few people actually pay money to attend seminars, and our seminars were not only expensive, but also tough like the Marine Corps. We asked people to devote 10 or more days to attend one of our business schools. Dr. Buckminster Fuller, the teacher who has had a tremendous influence on my life, often said, "The more people you serve, the more effective you become." He was not into money, but he was into being of service. Rich Dad said, "One of the big differences between an S and a B is the number of customers they can handle." He also said, "If you want to be rich, simply serve more people." By 1994, our last business school had over 350 people in the class, paying $5,000 each to attend. If you do the math, the money was good. What was not good was that there were only 350 people. I knew that if I truly wanted to help those kids in Asia, I was not going to be able to do it doing things the way I was doing them. In other words, I knew it was time to stop and figure out how to go from the S quadrant to the B quadrant. Instead of trying to leap across the Grand Canyon, Kim and I were now ready to climb up the other side. It was time to go through what Rich Dad called the eye of the needle. Going through the eye of the needle. As most of you know, one of the problems with being self-employed in the S quadrant is the word self. In many cases, the self-employed person is the product, the person who is hired to do the work. When you look at the BI triangle, starting from the cash flow level on up to product, the self-employed person is in charge of everything, all the elements. In most cases, being self-employed makes it very difficult to get to the B quadrant. It can be difficult to get yourself out of the way. Between 1984 and 1994, I was that person. I was the self in self-employed. Although I did it intentionally, the reality disturbed me. A question I often asked myself was, how can I teach people what I have been teaching in our business schools without my personally teaching them? We tried training other instructors, but that process was a long, hard, tedious process. It was difficult to find people to go through the training process to become instructors. It was hard to teach other people to teach the way we taught. It's not easy to get a class of over 300 people to learn accounting and investing in one day. It was almost as tough as teaching them to walk across fire. After selling the business in 1994, I had time to go back to my question. How can I teach people what I have been teaching in our business schools without my teaching them? I moved into the mountains near Bisbee, Arizona, and was secluded enough to begin working on the answer to my question. For 2 years, I worked on the question. When I left Bisbee, I had the rough draft for Rich Dad, Poor Dad on my Macintosh computer and a rough sketch with computations for the cash flow board game. I was going through the eye of the needle and moving from the S quadrant to the B quadrant. Rich Dad had learned about the eye of the needle from Sunday school. He said, a popular Bible verse goes something like this: "It is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to pass into heaven." Rich Dad continued, modifying the verse to say, "Forget the camel. If a man can pass through the eye of a needle, he will enter a world of tremendous wealth." Now, Rich Dad was a very religious man and was not making fun of the verse. He was simply modifying it to create his own lesson. In business terms, what he meant was that for an entrepreneur to pass through the eye of a needle, the entrepreneur has to leave himself behind. What passes through the eye of the needle is the entrepreneur's idea or intellectual property. There are many examples of entrepreneurs going through the eye of the needle throughout history. Here are a few. When Henry Ford designed his automobile to be mass-produced, he passed through the eye of the needle. Up until then, most cars were custom-ordered and handmade. When Steve Jobs and his team at Apple created the iPod, the iPad, the iPhone, and iTunes, they went through the eye of the needle. When someone like Steven Spielberg or George Lucas creates a movie, they too go through the eye of the needle. McDonald's went through the eye of the needle by franchising their hamburger business worldwide. When a network marketer builds a downline of other business owners, he or she goes through the eye of the needle. When investors buy an asset, such as an apartment house that cash flows money into their pocket each and every month, they have gone through the eye of the needle. A politician who uses the media to campaign is going through the eye of the needle. A politician who goes door to door is not. When inventors or authors sell their invention or their book to a large company, which in return pays them royalties, they have gone through the eye of the needle. When I took what I had learned from Rich Dad and created the board game and wrote the book, I was going through the eye of the needle. I was getting myself out of the equation. When I created my nylon shoe pocket wallet for runners and did not first have my idea protected by an intellectual property attorney, I was not going through the eye of the needle. I was simply giving my idea to my competition and making them rich. They went through the eye of the needle, and I fell into the Grand Canyon. I had a great new product, but without the legal level to protect my product, the BI triangle was not complete. The chick breaks through its shell. When I returned to Phoenix with a draft of the book and the cash flow board game in hand, I knew I was making my move to the B quadrant. Kim and I began to design and build a company according to the BI triangle. The moment we put our products in the marketplace, the heavens of abundance opened up. The product line was officially unveiled on my 50th birthday, April 8, 1997. From the start of the Rich Dad Company, we had a few struggles to breathe life into the business. The main struggles we had were keeping up with demand, traveling the world to open new markets, and counting the money. In June 2000, the call from the Oprah Winfrey Show came, and the heavens really opened. Kim and I were leaping from S to B. At this point, I began to better understand what Rich Dad meant by being true to the process. The process will give you glimpses of a better future, just to keep you going. The power of mastering the BI triangle. Harnessing the power of the three types of money: competitive, cooperative, and spiritual money. Going through the eye of the needle. After being on Oprah's show, I truly felt like the chick that had finally cracked through its shell. Before Oprah, no one knew me. After Oprah, regardless of where I go in the world, people stop me on the street to let me know they have read Rich Dad Poor Dad or played the cash flow games. In 2002, I was in an antique store in Stockholm, Sweden. The owner, a very blonde Swede, was an expert in Chinese antiques. Recognizing me, he said, "I was on a buying trip to China a few months ago. While floating down the Yangtze River, I glanced into a houseboat and saw a Chinese family playing the Chinese version of your cash flow board game. At that moment, I realized that I had kept my promise to those kids in the sweatshop, kids who were working to make me rich. Now my products were working for kids just like them, teaching families, people young and old, how to have money work for them rather than working all their lives for money and then hoping to have the government take care of them." In February 2004, the New York Times did a full-page feature story about the cash flow game and about the hundreds of clubs forming throughout the world. Clubs were forming just to play the game and to learn what my rich dad had taught me. When I saw that article, I could not believe my eyes. I could not believe the magic. To me, the New York Times writing this article was as big as being on Oprah's show. When I saw the article, I knew that what I had learned from teaching my business school for entrepreneurs and business school for investors had been successfully transformed into a product, the cash flow games, that could teach what I used to teach. People were now learning the fundamentals of accounting and investing in less than a day. On top of that, many of the players have had significant breakthroughs in how they see the world. For them, the game delivered the paradigm shift, the shift from seeing the world of money as a frightening place to seeing it as an exciting place. Instead of looking for experts and blindly turning their money over to these so-called experts, through the game, many people realized that they could become their own financial experts. They could take control of their own financial future, and many of them have. Best of all, instead of personally teaching only 350 people at a time and charging them thousands of dollars, the cash flow game was now going to them and teaching hundreds of thousands of people, many of them for free. Instead of my teaching them, they were teaching themselves, and then teaching and sharing with others. When I saw the New York Times article, I knew the 10-year period from 1994 to 2004 was coming to an end. However, even though that 10-year process is complete, we know the mission continues. Get yourself out of the way. Before you quit your job, you may want to remember the lesson of this chapter. The lesson is that the scope of the mission determines the product. It is very tough making a lot of money or serving a lot of people simply by working harder physically. If you want to serve a lot of people and/or make a lot of money, you may need to get yourself out of the way and pass through the eye of the needle. Before you quit your job, you may also want to determine if you would be happiest in the S quadrant or the B quadrant. If you want to grow into the B quadrant, remember that it takes much stronger fundamentals in the BI triangle and an even stronger team to allow you to go through the eye of the needle. And before you quit your job, you may want to have a moment of silence in memory of the dot-com companies that failed. I believe the reason so many failed was that many of the entrepreneurs were attempting to leap from the E quadrant to the B quadrant. When the bust came, they too looked like Wile E. Coyote with only air beneath their feet. They did not make it through the eye of the needle. A winning team. Success or failure in business has to do with work ethic, determination, and desire. Most people who make that jump have tons of all three. Yet the biggest determining factor has even more to do with learning three critical skills that will turn any business into a success. First, in order to build a business, you have to be able to sell because sales equals income. When income is lacking, it's usually because the owner doesn't like to, doesn't know how to, or is simply reluctant to sell. Without sales, however, you have no income. There is a myth that you have to be an attack dog to sell. Not true. Second, in order to build a real business or network and move out of the S quadrant, you have to be able to attract, build, and motivate a great team. In the world of small business, everyone on that team has to be willing to sell, regardless of their position in the company. In order to make that happen, the third element becomes critical. That is your ability to teach others in the business how to sell, how to be great team players, and how to succeed. It is this skill that ensures growth, profit, and longevity. The sad fact is that most business owners are never taught how to do any of those things. As a matter of fact, most of us are conditioned to believe that sales is a nasty task, that if you want things done right, you have to do them yourself, and that teaching is what you experienced in school. When we work in business, the very first thing we do to increase income is to help people establish what we call the code of honor. The code is a simple set of rules that turns even ordinary people into a championship team, a team that not only sells, but is hungry to learn and enforces an incredible level of accountability for personal conduct, performance, and numbers. It articulates the behaviors that are critical for success, and it demands the agreement of all team members to play that way. Most people would like to be the best they can be. As a business owner, you have to create the environment or context that will make that happen. It's not only something that you can learn, but it's something that will make you successful. Many times in business, it's not what you deliver, but how you deliver it that makes the biggest difference. It's the strength and commitment of your team and their passion to promote and serve others that determine your reputation, your success, and your cash flow. Blair Singer, Rich Dad Advisor and author of Sales Dogs and Team Code of Honor. Choosing the right entity. Few people appreciate it, but choosing the right entity structure for your business is just as important as choosing the right partner for your business. If you go into business with the wrong person, your efforts may be doomed from the start. The wrong person may too freely spend your money, may obligate the company to contracts it cannot fulfill, and may alienate co-workers before the first product or service is ever delivered. The wrong partner can leave you unprotected and waste all of your efforts and energy. Likewise, choosing the wrong legal structure can also lead directly to failure. Starting out, you want to have as much asset and legal protection as possible. But by choosing a sole proprietorship or a general partnership, bad entities that offer no protection whatsoever, you stand to lose everything you build into your business, along with all of your personal assets. Plaintiffs and their attorneys love to see businesses operated as sole proprietorships and general partnerships because they can reach both business and personal assets when they bring a claim. They have free rein to reach all of your assets. Instead, use a good entity such as a C corporation, S corporation, limited liability company, or limited partnership. These entities protect your personal assets from attack against the business. And like the right partner, the right entity will help you advance your protection and future prospects. Garrett Sutton, Esquire, Rich Dad Advisor, author of Buying and Selling a Business, Start Your Own Corporation, Writing Winning Business Plans, and the ABCs of Getting Out of Debt. Rich Dad's Entrepreneurial Lesson Number 8. Design a business that can do something that no other business can do. Chapter 8. What is the job of a business leader? The business leader. What is the business leader's most important job? I asked Rich Dad. Well, there are many jobs that are very important. It would be hard to say if any one job is more important than the other. Instead of just one job, I can tell you what I think my 8 most important jobs are. The following is Rich Dad's list. 1. Clearly define the mission, goals, and vision of the company. 2. Find the best people, and forge them into a team. 3. Strengthen the company on the inside. 4. Expand the company on the outside. 5. Improve the bottom line. 6. Invest in research and development. 7. Invest in tangible assets. 8. Be a good corporate citizen. What happens if the leader cannot perform those jobs? I asked. You need to change leaders, said Rich Dad. Besides, if the leader cannot do these things, the company will probably disappear anyway. That is why most new companies are gone within 10 years. Only a mission. Over the years, I have met many people with an extremely strong sense of mission. I have had people come up to me and say things such as, I want to save the environment. My invention will eliminate the need for fossil fuels. I want to start a charity that provides shelter for runaway kids. My technology is what the world has been waiting for. I want to find a cure for that disease. While their care and concern may be genuine, many of these good-hearted people fail to fulfill their mission simply because all they have is a mission. A lack of business skills. Earlier in this book, I mentioned that many people spend years in school or at work developing skills that are not relevant or important to the BI triangle. I mentioned the example of a school teacher who may have years of education and teaching experience, yet those years of education may not transfer to the BI triangle if that person decides to become an entrepreneur. That person simply lacks business skills. When I left the Marine Corps in 1974, I too was in that predicament. By 1974, I had two professions. My first profession was as a licensed ship's officer, licensed to sail any ship of unlimited tonnage throughout the world. I could have made a lot of money with this profession. The problem was, I did not want to be a ship's officer anymore. My second profession was that of a military pilot with great training and years of experience. Many of my friends went to work for the airlines or with police and fire departments as pilots. I could have done the same thing, except that I no longer wanted to fly. In 1974, when I returned home to see my dad struggling financially, I suspected that I had found my new mission, or at least a problem worth solving. The problem was, all I had was a mission. When you look at the BI triangle, there are levels for people specially trained in accounting, law, design, marketing, and systems. There are not levels that say ship's officer or pilot. So I was just like the many people I mentioned above, people with a mission, but with a lack of real business skills. What I did have going for me was that I had years of apprenticeship to Rich Dad. I had worked in all aspects of the BI triangle through his businesses, so I did have some business experience, but only as a kid. At least I knew that a business was a system of systems, and I understood the importance of the BI triangle as a business structure. Complaining to Rich Dad. One day I complained to Rich Dad that I had almost no marketable skills that applied to the BI triangle. Pointing to the team side of the BI triangle, I complained that no major corporation would hire me to be on their team. I whined on about not having a formal education at any of the levels. After I was through complaining, I looked up at Rich Dad for what I hoped would be a sympathetic answer. All he said was, "Neither do I." A mission is all that Rich Dad started with. What a leader does. A leader's job is to change the company to allow it to grow and serve more people. If the leader cannot change the company, the leader keeps the company small, and the company may begin to shrink. Once again, I use the BI triangle to further clarify this point. When I was in the S quadrant, our products were the business school for entrepreneurs and the business school for investors. The problem with the business was that I was too much a part of the product, as well as the rest of the BI triangle. If I was going to be a leader, I needed to stop and completely redesign the business. Trying to fix a poorly designed business while the business is running is like trying to change a flat tire while the car is still moving. That is why Kim and I stopped and took 2 years off before we started a new business. Building a new BI triangle. In 1996, when I came out of the mountains around Bisbee, Arizona, all I had were pencil sketches of the cash flow game board, a rough draft of Rich Dad Poor Dad in my computer, and a simple 2-page business plan. As the sole employee of my yet-to-be-formed company, I knew my next step was to find the right people and put a team together. Sketching the game board was the easy part. Finding someone who could engineer the information systems required to make the game work was the first step. The game had to be engineered to literally change the way people think about money. At that time, there was only one person I knew who had such a mind. That was an old friend named Rolf Parda, fondly known as Spock. We call him Spock because he looks like Leonard Nimoy of Star Trek fame. He also happens to be as smart as the character Nimoy played. This is where the 4 types of thinking are important. For this phase of the business, I brought the C thinking and P thinking to the project. I was creative enough to sketch a crude game board design, and I understood how people learned from my 10 years of teaching. Spock brought the T thinking and A thinking to the project. As a trained CPA with an MBA and a former banker with an extremely high IQ, Spock lives in a world of his own. Very few people can carry on a conversation with him. He speaks a dialect of English I doubt anyone else understands. Arriving at his home, I spread my crude sketches and diagrams on his dining room table. Doing my best to communicate by words, gestures, and pointing at my sketches, Spock and I finally began to converse. It is tough being the creative and people side of the project, speaking to what I hoped would be the technical and analytical side. Finally, about an hour into the discussion, Spock's eyes lit up. He was beginning to understand the people and creative side. "Why do people need this game?" he asked. "This is common sense." Chuckling, I replied, "To you it's common sense. You have an MBA, you're a CPA, and a former banker. So to you, this is common sense. But to the average person, this is a foreign language. For many people, this is a radically new way of thinking." Spock grinned. The points on his ears grew a little longer. "Give me 3 months, and I'll give you what you want." We agreed upon a price for his services, shook hands, and I left feeling confident that I had found the right person for the task. 3 months later, and after much interaction with me, he had all the complex mathematical equations done. I had done my part and made better crude sketches. Together, Kim, Spock, and I played the game. Surprisingly, the game ran well. It was a tough game, but the numbers worked, the lessons were revealed, and we were happy. The next person I went to see was an intellectual property attorney to begin the process of filing for patents, trademarks, and other legal fences to protect my intellectual property. Spock went back to work with his A thinking cap on, using his analytical mind this time, and began back-testing the game on a computer. He ran the game through 150,000 different simulations without a failure. When he handed me his pages of mathematical computations, he was grinning from ear to ear. The challenge of the project had made him very happy. To this day, I have no idea what the math on those pages meant, but when I turned those same pages over to my attorney, he grinned just like Spock. I felt like I was in school again. The two A students were going over test papers and enjoying it, and I, the C, D, and occasional F student, wondered what they were so excited about. As you may have already guessed, I was now building a new BI triangle. As entrepreneurs, Kim and I were clear on our mission. Now, as leaders of the project and using the 5 levels inside the triangle as a guide, we were now putting together a team. After about a month, my attorney called and said, "You can now move forward and show your game to other people. We do not have a patent yet, but I have filed the application and you've staked your claim. You still need to have people sign confidentiality agreements before they see your product." As you may recall, this is the step I left out when I created the Runner's Shoe Pocket Wallet. Within weeks after inventing the product, I began selling the shoe pocket without protection. In less than 3 months, our competitors were selling my creation. It was a devastating mistake. But learning my lesson from that mistake was about to pay off in a very, very big way. The big test. For the next few weeks, Kim, Spock, and I worked to get our prototype games ready. We had played the game with a number of our friends, and the game worked well. The reason the game worked well is that all of our friends are professional investors. Now we were about to beta test the game. A beta test is a trial run to see if the game works with the average player. The game at that stage was just rough sketches on heavy butcher paper, and we used different caliber bullets as game pieces. The bullets worked well because their weight helped keep the paper down. We reserved a hotel conference room, enough for about 20 people, and then began calling people, mostly strangers, to come and play. You have no idea how hard that was. When people found out the game was an educational game about investing and accounting, most people found an excuse to not be there. "Does it require math?" asked one person. When I said yes, he hung up. The game is played. One bright Saturday morning, in walked 9 people. One who agreed to be there simply did not show up. After a few niceties, the game was on, and it went on and on and on. There were 2 tables, one table with 4 people and one with 5. After about 3 hours, one person raised her hand to signal she had won her game. The game had worked for one person, and the game went on and on and on. Finally, at about 1 p.m., we shut the game down. Frustration was so high, I thought fights were about to break out. No one else had gotten out of the rat race. No one else had won the game. As people left, many politely shook my hands, but no one said much. Most just gave me a strange look and left. Decision time. After packing up our boxes, Kim, Spock, and I had a debriefing session. "Maybe it's too hard," I said. Kim and Spock nodded. "But one person got out of the rat race. She won the game," said my perpetually optimistic wife, Kim. "Yeah, but most people didn't win," I moaned. "They didn't get out of the rat race. They didn't learn anything. All they did was get frustrated." "I did my best to make it simple," said Spock. I don't know if I can make it any easier without losing the objectives for playing the game. Well, let's get the boxes into the car and go home. Kim and I leave for Hawaii tomorrow. We'll have to decide if we go forward with this project or shut it down. For the next week, Kim and I would get up, have our coffee, and walk on the beach. One morning, I would be overly enthusiastic, ready to continue with the project. The next morning, I would awake depressed, ready to shut the project down. This went on for a week. It was a horrible vacation. The reason I spend so much time talking about this period is that it was a very tough time for me. When people say they have fears about taking risks and going forward on a project, well, so do I. Kim and I were in turmoil during this period of time. It was go or no go. It was put up or shut up. It was live our mission or just go back to making money. Kim and I both believed that many of the important lessons that Rich Dad had taught me had been transferred into our new game. We knew we had to move forward. Spock, Kim and I decided to go through the eye of the needle. We had transferred this knowledge I had learned from Rich Dad and placed it in a tangible product. This took place in the summer of 1996. Kim and I then went forward and hired a graphic artist to bring the game to life. He then shipped his work to a game manufacturing company in Canada. In November 1996, the commercial version of the game was played at a friend's investment seminar in Las Vegas, Nevada. The game worked. Participants loved the game. The paradigm shifts we wanted were happening. Immediately, we flew to Singapore to another friend's investment workshop. Once again, the game did its magic. Trademarks and trade dress. We then worked on the graphics that help identify the Rich Dad brand. You may notice that most of our products have a similar theme, look, and feel. We use specific colors: purple, gray, black, and a few secondary colors. People associate the color schemes with the Rich Dad Company. If people infringe upon our trade dress or trademarks, which people often do, our legal team begins talking to them. Our trademarks and trade dress are assets called intellectual property that have great value all over the world. In China, they call Rich Dad the Purple Storm. The business takes off. Once the business was put together, the company began to take off. Orders started flying through the door. Cash flowed in. All debts were immediately paid off, and soon the company was bursting at the seams. We were forced to buy an office building to house a growing company. Rich Dad, Poor Dad made the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times bestseller lists, one of the few books on the lists not published by the large publishing houses. Publishing houses started calling, offering us a lot of money to sign with them. Oprah's show called, and in the summer of 2000, after I was on her program, the company really exploded. Almost overnight, we became an international success. How to expand a business. There are many ways a business can expand. 1. Replicate the entire BI triangle. Basically, once you work the bugs out of the first business, you open more of them. Many retailers and restaurants expand this way. In many cities, there are restaurants that have 3 or 4 successful stores located throughout the city. In order to grow bigger, the leader may need to change leaders. Often, the owner will sell to a bigger company and start over again. 2. Franchise. McDonald's is the most famous example of expansion via franchising. 3. Take the company public through an IPO. With funds from places like Wall Street, the company can tap into a virtually unlimited supply of money as long as the company keeps on expanding. 4. License the products. This is the way we designed the Rich Dad Company to expand. Licensing is basically allowing another business to produce your products. As our success grew, our licensing, which is the legal level of the business, expanded to 42 different languages in over 55 countries. It costs us no money to produce or store the books. We do not need a giant warehouse, an extensive sales force, or a large inventory to ship product around the world. The Single Tactic Multiple Strategy Plan. My training as a military officer required that we know the difference between a tactic and a strategy. In very simple terms, a tactic is what you do. A strategy is the plan on how to get the tactic done. One of my military science instructors was adamant about the importance of using a single tactic, multiple strategy plan of warfare to win. He would say, a military leader must focus on one objective or tactic. He must only want to do one thing. Everything else is a strategy on how to get that one tactic done. He would then use examples of military conflict after military conflict that was won by the leader that had the best strategies focused on a single tactic. When I entered the business world, I carried his lessons with me. Soon, I began to see that companies that used the single tactic, multiple strategy type of planning were companies that won in business. For example, Domino's Pizza started with a single tactic to beat its competition. To distinguish itself in the pizza wars, Domino's designed a company around a single tactic. That tactic was to promise pizza in 30 minutes or less. An entire business was designed around that single promise, a single tactic. To make that single tactic a reality, the company then had multiple strategic plans. Once Domino's entered the marketplace, it immediately began taking market share from its competitors. Competitors, such as Pizza Hut, could not compete because the business was not designed to meet such a promise. To combat Domino's, Pizza Hut increased advertising, the communications level, to announce new and different types of pizza. The product level. The pizza wars were on. Pizza Hut was fighting with a better product. Domino's was fighting with a guaranteed faster delivery. If you have read Jim Collins' book Good to Great, you will notice that many of the great companies have single tactics. Jim Collins does not call it a single tactic, multiple strategy way of winning. Instead, he calls it the hedgehog principle. In his book, he uses Walmart's single tactic, the lowest price for good products, as the reason it beats its competitors who have multiple tactics and even more strategies. In other words, Walmart's competitors simply have not clearly defined their own single winning tactic. Walmart's entire business is focused on one promise, a promise customers clearly like. That means Walmart does not win in the product category. Like Domino's, it wins in the system level of the BI triangle. You may recall that Thomas Edison won the electric light battle at the system level, not at the product level. Henry Ford also won at the system level. He simply mass-produced low-priced cars for the working family. He never promised the best-made cars. He just promised the best-priced cars, and then designed a business around his promise. McDonald's does not produce the best hamburger. Ray Kroc built a business around the idea of selling the best franchise to people who want to own a franchise. When I was in the Arizona mountains, the very simple business plan I came up with was based upon one single tactic and 3 strategies. The first page of the simple 2-page plan looked like this. Tactic: play the cash flow game. Strategies: 1. Write a book. 2. Do an infomercial. 3. Teach investment seminars using the game. On the second page, I wrote a brief plan on how I thought I could accomplish the 3 strategies. The single tactic was to get as many people as possible to play the game. I knew that if I created a great game and people played it, their lives would change. They would be able to see another world of opportunity. They would be less inclined to blindly turn their money over to people they thought were experts, such as mutual fund managers, and might be inspired to become their own financial experts. That was it. I knew, if successful, I would make money from the strategies as well as the single tactic. A low-risk idea. The first lesson: always have a low-risk idea or strategy to fall back on. Rich Dad taught me that whenever you start a business or invest in something, you need to have a low-risk idea. For example, when investing in real estate, if the investment paid me something each and every month, that was a low-risk investment. Even if the property did not go up in value, I was still receiving some compensation for my investment dollars. The strategy of teaching investment seminars using the game was my low-risk idea. Since I came from the seminar business, I knew that if the other 2 strategies did not work and no one wanted my game, I could recoup my investment in the product development of the game simply by putting on investment seminars. Simply put, a low-risk idea is something you know you can do. Design a business that can do something that no other business can do. The second lesson: design the business around a unique tactical advantage. In my plan, my tactic was to play the game, so I virtually eliminated all competition. I eliminated all competition because if the legal work was strong, no one else could do what our business did. No one else has our cash flow games. As Rich Dad said, design a business that can do something that no other business can do. Simply put, focus all your efforts on your core strength, your unique product. The plan worked. Once we had built the books to a certain level of success on our own, we licensed other publishers around the world to publish versions in other languages. We licensed the rights to sell certain products through infomercials. We went on the road to do investment seminars across the United States, in Australia, and in Singapore. Cash flowed in from all 3 strategies, as well as from the sales of the game. When I talked about spiritual money, I really did not think we would have made as much money as we did from just our strategies. It was like magic. More strategies today. Today, the tactic is the same. All of our strategies are focused on getting people to play the cash flow games. Today, the number of strategies has increased. Today, our business looks like this. 1. Books in 42 different languages. 2. Games in 14 different languages. 3. Network marketing companies using our products. 4. A coaching company. 5. A seminar company. 6. A national radio show. 7. Cash flow clubs throughout the world. 8. Digital online game initiatives. 9. Curriculum initiatives, including richkidsmartkid.com which offers free games and curriculum for kindergarten through 12th grade. Our company grows by adding partners who can add to our strategies. Via licensing or co-venturing, we do not have to grow the size or number of employees of the Rich Dad Company. Our company remains small, but has big partners. 3 jobs of leaders. At the start of this chapter, I listed a set of jobs Rich Dad thought were important for a leader. Once the product was developed and protected legally via patents and trademarks, Kim and I focused on the following 3 jobs of leaders. 1. Strengthen the company on the inside. 2. Expand the company on the outside. 3. Improve the bottom line. Working for cooperative money. Through all this very rapid growth, the company handled the expansion without a hitch. Instead of success destroying us as it did with the nylon wallet company, the Rich Dad Company grew stronger with the growth. The company grew because we were cooperative, working for cooperative money. Every dollar that came in from our licensed strategic partners was a cooperative dollar. By cooperating instead of competing, our strategic partners get richer, and so do we. I believe our company was pretty well designed. It was designed to grow. We leveraged the talents of our team to build and protect intellectual property, and then leveraged the intellectual property through licensing all over the world. We found the right team to guide us in this process. As we grew the Rich Dad Company, we did not have the growing pains many small companies go through. We did not have cash flow problems, space problems, or adding employee problems. The company remained basically the same size even as we grew exponentially. What expanded was the number of strategic partners. As we grew, more and more money flowed in, and very few dollars flowed out. All my years of screwing up, correcting, and learning were paying off. No more glimpses. Today, instead of just a glimpse of the world I want to live in, Kim and I live in a world better than we ever dreamed of. It seems like magic, and it is magic. The money and lifestyle are great, but it is the sense of making a difference in so many lives that is the true magic. When I think back on my dad sitting unemployed in front of the TV set, the kids in the sweatshops in Asia from my wallet business, and then to the families playing cash flow on the Yangtze River, that is the real magic. As Dr. Buckminster Fuller would say, it's the work of the Great Spirit. As Lance Armstrong says, it's not about the bike. The entrepreneur's job is done. Once I saw the article about the cash flow game in the New York Times, I knew my job as an entrepreneur was over. We had done our job. Kim and I had taken the business as far as we could take it. We knew it was time for a new team. In the summer of 2008, our new team took over. The team has changed, but their jobs are the same. Their jobs as leaders are: clearly define the mission, goals, and vision of the company. Find the best people and forge them into a team. Strengthen the company on the inside. Expand the company on the outside. Improve the bottom line. Invest in research and development. Invest in tangible assets. Be a good corporate citizen. Rich Dad's Entrepreneurial Lesson Number 9. Don't fight for the bargain basement. Chapter 9. How to find good customers. One day during my junior year of high school, Rich Dad and I were walking past an entrance to a hotel when we heard a man's voice shouting loudly, "I will not pay you another dime. You have not kept your agreement." Looking up, I saw a family of 5, with a very upset father yelling at a local man in a Hawaiian print shirt. "But all you have paid is a deposit," the local man protested. "You still owe us the balance. I cannot let you check in until the balance is paid. You were to have paid your balance in full a month ago. You're lucky we even held your rooms for you. This is our peak season." "It's a good thing you did hold our rooms for us," snarled the father. "You'd have heard from my attorney if you hadn't." "I still need to be paid," said the local man, holding his ground. "I told you that I will pay you. Don't you have ears? Just check us in, and I will pay you," the father growled. "I have a check right here made out to you. Let us get into our room, and we will settle this once and for all." This was the era before credit cards. "You need to pay in cash. A check will not do. That is why we ask you to pay in full, in advance. It gives us time to clear a personal check." "What is wrong with you?" asked the father, now shouting at the top of his lungs. "Don't you people understand English? I told you I would pay you. Now show us to our room. Do I have to call your boss to get things done?" A crowd started to gather. Not wanting to make a scene, the man in the Hawaiian shirt picked up the mountain of suitcases, loaded them on a trolley, and directed the family to their room. "He'll never get paid," said Rich Dad as we continued. "How do you know?" I asked. "We dealt with the same guy 3 years ago. He did the same thing to us. He's going to go to the room, write the check, and then stop payment on it." "What happened after he stopped payment?" I asked. "By the time we found out his check was no good, he had already checked out. We called him once he was back on the mainland. I believe they live in California, and we tried to collect." "Then what happened?" "When we threatened to take him to court, he agreed to pay us half of what he owed. He said our service was bad, and he felt he was paying us what we deserved. He said he was being generous, paying 50% of what he owed us. Since it would have cost more to take him to court, we agreed. Even then, it was 6 months before he paid anything." We walked for a while in silence. Disturbed, I finally had to ask, "Is this common in business?" "Yes, unfortunately it is. You will always have good customers and bad customers. Fortunately, I have found about 80% of all customers are good customers. 5% are like him, just horrible, and the other 15% are in between," replied Rich Dad. "Oh, on top of that, this same guy had the nerve to call again last year and try to book a tour package with us. What nerve!" "Did you do business with him?" "Are you kidding?" laughed Rich Dad. "I had already fired him. Our reservation department had his picture and his name on our Do Not Do Business With Again list. The person taking the call remembered his name and told him we were full. This was before computers, which keep track of customers today." "You fire customers?" I asked in surprise. "Absolutely," said Rich Dad. "You fire bad customers just as you would fire a bad employee. If you do not get rid of your bad employees, the good employees will leave. If I do not fire bad customers, not only will my good customers leave, but many of my good employees will leave as well." "But aren't some of the complaints or upsets your fault too?" I asked. "Couldn't the complaints be legitimate?" "Yes," replied Rich Dad. "Often it is our fault. Our staff does make mistakes or may offend customers. Our systems can break down. That is why we look into every complaint and take it seriously. Just as you look both ways before you cross the street, when it comes to complaints, we have to look both ways, at the customer and at our operations. Is it hard firing people? I asked. Being 17 years old at the time, the thought of firing someone, especially an adult, frightened me. It was not something I wanted to do. It's never pleasant, said Rich Dad. It's one of the more unpleasant yet important jobs of an entrepreneur. Your job is a people job. People are your biggest assets and biggest liabilities. One day you'll have to fire someone. I am sure it will be an experience you will never forget. Rich Dad and I entered a restaurant and found a table to have lunch. Once the waitress had filled our water glasses, handed us the menu, and explained the specials, Rich Dad continued with his lesson on people. The same is true with advisors. You must be able to fire bad advisors. If you have accountants or attorneys who do a poor job, or if the job is too big for them, or if they are only interested in receiving their fees and not helping your business will suffer. If you do not get rid of bad advisors, you are responsible. The ultimate price of bad advice is far more than what you pay your advisors in fees for good advice. I had one accountant give me bad tax advice, and it cost me nearly $60,000 in back taxes and penalties. On top of that,